on Talking Lifestyle, around the house.
Talking lifestyle, talking about it. Do you?
All right, 12 minutes to 12 it is now. Very timely time to speak to Paul Denny from, of course, Paul Denny Conveyancing. He's sitting with me in the studio. G'day, mate.
G'day, Tim.
Is it a controversial thing, buying off the plan, in general terms, before we get into the specifics?
Absolutely. A little bit more nowadays because people are getting to the end of the project, which started maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes.
And the climate is quite different today to what it was back then.
Yeah, is that one of the issues with buying off the plan, the length of time it takes from you signing up to settlement?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you can get so much in place at the beginning, but you really can't finance something like your financing arrangements until the end.
No, that's right.
Yes.
All right. Now, if you've got any questions for Paul, by all means, 13 12 83. But just a few things. If you're buying off the plan, a clear description of what is being bought.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And look, that all comes down to the reputation of the developer themselves.
Okay.
I always recommend to people to do a little bit of research on what that developer has done previously.
Right.
And if you can see that they've done lots of big buildings and they've all been finished off well and there's been no issues, that gives you a lot of comfort.
Yep.
But then the next step, of course, is to make sure clearly what you are getting, like the size, the inclusions,
Of course,
the standard
yeah.
of finish, etc.
Yeah.
Usually there's a display around somewhere.
Yep.
So go and have a look at that. Take some photos.
Yes.
And
and make sure that what you end up with is what you signed
is
up
what
for.
you were promised for at the beginning. Yes,
I think that's a very important point,
Yes.
mate, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now,
Yeah.
GST. This is interesting. I mean, is that in addition to the price, or can that be included? Yes,
It's generally included,
Right.
and it should be included.
Okay.
But when I have reviewed some contracts, I have seen a couple, not a lot, but the odd one, where the developer actually does pay GST on the sale.
Okay.
But they try and add it onto the price.
Uh-huh.
So I had someone once who was buying a property for $860,000.
Yep.
Buried in the contract, this says plus GST. So it wasn't 860; it was about something like $930,000.
Well, another 80 grand.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
So, gee.
and just to make it even better, stamp duty's payable on the GST as well.
Oh.
So gets better.
This is why we need Paul Denny.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you a supplementary question about this when we talk about land tax. Is the purchase paying some of the developer's land tax bill?
Well, that's what they ask for.
Right.
Okay. Now, you and I wouldn't pay land tax.
No.
Because either we're going to move in there, it's our principal place of residence,
Yep.
or it's below the threshold from which land tax is paid.
Okay.
But whilst it's a development site, of course, it's worth many millions of dollars. The developer does pay land tax on the development site. And they will generally try and recoup some of that land tax from the eventual purchasers. One of the things we always ask for is that to be deleted from the contract, and invariably it is.
Okay.
So it's a try-on.
Okay. It's a try-on?
Yes.
But in 99% of the times you get it taken out?
90%,
Okay.
just about all the time.
Have you got a comment, because it's the topic of the day, really, or topic of the week, whether young first home buyers should pay stamp duty, get relief from stamp duty, and they're talking about now making a land tax adjustment rather than stamp duty, because stamp duty on a home in Sydney is really a hefty impost.
Well, it is. Look, the median price for any property in Sydney now is over $1 million.
Yeah, that's right.
The stamp duty on that's $40,000.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
we're talking about a young couple who are buying their first home. Now, to find $40,000 on
Extra,
top of what you're buying the property for, that really is, you've got to have a taxable income of about $60,000 or $70,000.
Yeah.
And this is young couples having to find that on top of buying the property. So, and then it gets worse the more you go up. I mean, there's plenty of times people bringing in checks to us for the stamp duty for over $100,000.
Whoa.
And we're not talking about wealthy people.
No, we're not. And really, in general terms, government, federal and state, have got to do something about this.
Yes. Yeah, look, the suggestion has been that there's a transition that's happening in Canberra now from reliance on stamp duty to a more annual land tax, which you'd think would be a lower amount. I'd like to see the details on that, because every time a government suggests that, surreptitiously, it ends up being more money. So you don't know where you end up on that one.
You can't trust them, can you?
Yes.
Now, this is interesting. Adjustments.
Yes.
Make sure they're fair and equitable on your off-the-plan unit.
Yes, so again, this is one of the conditions in the contract, and a really important reason why we should have a look at it. So if you're buying a unit, you'd generally expect maybe the council rates to be $1,000 a year. Now, because they're not rated individually at that time, the developer will propose, let's adjust on an amount. Now, that could be, say, $2,000.
Yeah.
but they're not paying anywhere near $2,000, so they make a little bit of cream on the adjustment. So again, it's just a matter of asking that to be trimmed back to a more reasonable amount.
Yeah, a few try-ons in there, isn't there?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
we were laughing about this in the office this morning. The sunset clause.
Yes.
It seems the sun can set a few times with some of these.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, the rules have changed on that a little bit
Have
now
they?
because,
Yeah.
look, what a sunset clause is all about is that obviously you can't wait around forever. If the building's never finished, you can't be expected to wait forever
No,
for it to be
of course
finished.
not. No, of course
But then again, if a project is starting now, in 3 years, say the sunset date's in 3 years' time, well, the value in 3 years' time could be significantly higher than what it is today. So you could get an unscrupulous developer saying, oh, well, we'll just quietly wait until the sunset date arrives, cancel all those contracts, and then offer to sell it to someone else for a much greater price.
I've heard that.
They can't do that anymore.
Good.
Because to do that, they have to get an order of the court.
Yes.
And they'll obviously have to convince the court the reasons why there's been a delay, etc. And I suspect the courts won't be terribly sympathetic.
No, was that a good thing our government did?
Oh, yes, it was.
Yeah, that is
most
a good thing.
definitely. Conversely, a purchaser can walk away once the sunset date arrives,
Yep.
which is a good thing if they've got their money tied up for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think this is an important one for Off the Plan. Fixing defects after it's finished.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do there? Is there
Well,
something you specifically can do?
There's two aspects to that. Now, number one is there's automatically a statutory building guarantee period.
Okay.
But that's between the builder and the owners corporation, if it's a strata.
Yeah.
But you're buying from a developer. The developer is not the builder. So we always like to see in those contracts typically a 3-month defects liability period. So the little things that go wrong in those early months
Yes.
are reported to the developer, and it's the developer's obligation to fix those little things up.
Yeah.
Doors that don't close properly, a tile might be loose, a dripping tap, things like that.
Yeah. Listeners are probably going to say, yeah, that's all well and good, but I ring them and they don't come. So have you got any recourse with that?
Well, this is where we're getting back to the reputation of the developer, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you're absolutely
Do your
right.
research.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think you need to research the person, the developer, not necessarily the agent you're dealing with, because they sell for anybody,
Yeah.
but the actual developers. Ask, what else have they done? Okay,
Yeah.
go and have a look at
Yeah.
it, and
Yeah.
hopefully maybe speak to someone that's bored in there and see what they've had to say about it.
Yeah, okay. Now, the dreaded stamp duty. Now, God, we paid ours well in advance
Yes.
of completion. What's the rules there?
Well, for you and me,
Yeah.
we're Australian residents. We've got 15 months after exchange of contracts to pay the stamp duty.
Okay.
If you were not an Australian resident, you've only got 3 months.
Wow.
This is one of the new measures that was introduced by the state government in June.
Yep.
So you're right. Often that can be 2 or 3 years ahead of when the building's actually finished.
Yeah.
Then the question is, what if it's never finished? Well, you do get your stamp duty back.
Yeah.
But of course, your money's tied up for that time. You don't get any interest as you get your stamp duty back. That's all.
Okay. Getting your finance.
Yes.
Getting that all organised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No lender is going to give you an absolute approval 3 years ahead.
No, they
of
won't, will they?
completion.
No.
They can give you a good idea.
Yep.
Okay, but who knows what the rules are going to be 3 years later? So you need to be really comfortable that what you're proposing is not on the borderline, like borrowing 95%.
Yes.
Yes. With no other security being offered or whatever.
Yeah.
So you will get an approval in principle today based on your own personal situation, your ability to service a loan, etc. But that's not going to stand you in any stead until you come to a few days before or a few weeks before settlement.
Oh, gee, mate. There's a lot of things to consider, isn't there?
Oh, yes.
And that's, why we need you, because when all you do is conveyancing, you get very good at it. Paul Denny. But that's a very important point you make, as everything we've discussed there, the reputation of the developer, pivotal to this whole situation.
That's the starting point.
Yeah, that is the starting point.
That's the starting point.
Just absolutely make sure getting what you paid for, basically.
Yes, absolutely.
Always good to see you, mate.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Tim.
that's Paul Denny. If you've got any inquiries about any of that, he's the man to contact. That's